Welcome, folks, to Great Business Stories. And today's episode is called PayPal, the greatest startup story of all time. And hands down, it has been one of my favorite stories to cover because you have such big characters who are now very much sitting at the top of the table business wise. We're talking Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, David Sachs, and many more. It's fascinating to recall how these guys started out and nearly didn't make it. There's also so much drama with boardroom coups, Russian fraudsters, Musk being forced into a merger against his will, the dotcom bubble bursting. I just loved it. And just to let you know, at the start of the podcast, we mentioned our main sources. Now, there's a link at the bottom of this podcast that brings you to our blog where the main sources are highlighted at the top of the article. And there's also links there to some really great photos that are relevant to this story. Enjoy it. It's a cracking episode. Morning, Keith.
Morning, Cayman. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. See, you all ready for the PayPal founder story?
I am indeed. Yeah, I think it's been a fascinating read. The book I read was brilliant, but I'm curious what drew you to the topic. This is your one.
What drew me to it was I remember the article from Fortune in 2007 where I first came across the name, the PayPal Mafia. And it wasn't the story, it was the photograph that was with it. It was this photo shoot of 13 of the PayPal alumni. Now, Elon Musk wasn't there. He was at an award ceremony somewhere. He couldn't make it. And the three YouTube guys who were also PayPal alumni, they weren't there because Google had bought YouTube. And Google, with their whole, don't do evil shit, thought that the gangster connotation wouldn't sit well with them.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, but you have this photo shoot with 13 of them, like Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, David Sachs, Max Levchin, and dressed up in kind of soprano type attire, tracksuit, leather jackets, sitting in this mafia-like hangout with whiskeys and cigars. And it was such a ludicrous photo shoot. I've never seen top business people, do that. And also I just thought, fair juice to them because it was a real piss take kind of photo. And that photo has always stuck with me. And the story itself within that Fortune article was really, really interesting because it's the story not so much of the founders of PayPal and how PayPal was founded, which is the story we're covering and was fascinating in its own right. But it was also what they went on to do after PayPal, which is why they've built up this huge reputation and there's this big aura around the PayPal mafia.
Yeah, I think for me, I missed that article completely. But having a background in dotcom and then moving into social media, Peter Thiel was a big figure, Reid Hoffman was a big figure. So I was more aware of the individuals after this particular event. So to go back and see those foundational moments and seminal moments is a fascinating story.
It is. And your source, I believe, was Jimmy Sonny's book, The Founders.
Yeah, really good book.
Yeah,
really entertaining, full of fantastic anecdotes, really.
Yeah, I read that as well while I was on holidays and found it fantastic. But I also got to give a shout out to that Fortune magazine article, which was written by Jeffrey O'Brien. And there was two other, I had a load of other sources, but two sources in particular that were very interesting. Guy Raz, How I Built This, had a two-parter with Max Levchin, who was the founder of PayPal and was their CTO. And that was a very, very interesting two-parter. And then there was this podcast called Crucible Moments, which is the podcast of Sequoia Capital. And Rolaf Botha, who was the PayPal CFO and is now the managing partner of Sequoia Capital, he moderated this episode of Crucible Moments, and Max Levchin was on it, Jimmy Sonny was on it, and Michael Moritz, who was the guy in Sequoia Capital who funded Elon Musk.com originally. So they're my sources. But look, it's a fantastic story. So I suppose we'll get into it.
So I suppose with any good story, maybe let's start at the beginning. So we're talking about, and maybe people aren't even aware of this, there was two competing concepts.
There was, and two competing companies, although initially they weren't competing. This is the really funny part of the whole story, how it almost happened by accident. You had the first company, which is PayPal, and PayPal was founded by you got to start off with Max Levchin. He was a Ukrainian-born computer whiz who, while he was in Ukraine, had very limited time on his mother's computer because she used it for work. And so he used to write out all the code by hand so that he could maximize the time on the computer. And his family moved to the US when he was 16. And then he went on to the University of Illinois because that was really the hotbed for computer science back then. While he was at the college, Mark Andreessen and his friends,
Mozilla Netscape, and
they were in the process of creating that. And Levchin was there while they were doing that. And we actually covered that in a Browser War episode, which we still have to release, which is a very interesting story in itself. So while at college, Levchin does a few side hustles. He's very entrepreneurial. But they're all just little earners. Nothing much comes of it. But in 1997, after he graduates, he goes to Palo Alto, which in 1997, if you're in the tech business and you're entrepreneur and you want to raise money, this really is ground zero because this was the height of the internet era. And so he moves there, and a friend of his called Luke Nosek, who goes on to be a founder of PayPal, recommends that he meets Peter Thiel, who had actually put some money into Luke Nosek's company. And Thiel, now you mentioned Thiel. Thiel is he's an interesting character.
Yeah, he is, isn't he? The fascinating.
Hard to warm to though, isn't he?
That's one way of putting it, all right.
Like the people some of our listeners will be aware of him. Even if you're not into business, you'll probably be aware of him from a political standpoint because he was a big fundraiser for J.D. Vance, this right-wing Republican author and senator. Peter Thiel was one of the first backers in Silicon Valley of Donald Trump back in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, so he considers himself a libertarian. Seems like an arch conservative to me, really.
I think he's just a contrarian. That's the impression I get from him. And he comes across in the podcasts I listen to as very analytical, very cold, very humorless. Now, having said that, the likes of Levchin and the people who get to know him say that once he backs you, he fills you with this kind of confidence. He really empowers you and he gets you to achieve amazing things by the confidence that he puts into you. So there is that aspect to him. But then you also look at, say, his history with Gawker, the media company that had to close down. Because Thiel funded Hulk Hogan's libel against Gawker, which led to the company closing down. And the staff of Gawker might say that he's a vindictive prick, So he's very divisive. But anyway, Levchin meets Thiel and he pitches this idea that he has for mobile security software for the Palm Pilot, which is this new handheld device back in 1997.
Thiel has a small sort of investment firm, hasn't he?
He does, yeah. I should have said Thiel started off in law and he has his whole career mapped out. He's one of these guys that's very analytical and very thorough, and his whole career mapped out that he's going to be, a big time lawyer. And part of his stepping stone on this career was to get a clerkship role in the Supreme Court, which is highly competitive. Only 36 people a year get in there. And when he applied and he was rejected, he himself admits he had a bit of a midlife crisis at the age of 25 and decides to quit law, goes into finance, becomes a derivative trader with Credit Suisse in New York for a few years. And then he sees the tech boom happening. He's really into technology. He raises, he raised $1 million from friends and family, moves back to California. And while he's looking for ventures to invest in, he's also teaching the small class at Stanford in currency investment. And that's where Levchin meets him. And Levchin pitches him this idea he has for mobile security software for Palm Pilot. Thiel loves the idea, straight away commits $100,000 to it. The company's first called FieldLink. I'm just going to leave it at PayPal because it goes from FieldLink to Confinity and then to PayPal, just avoid confusion. They form PayPal and the original founders are Thiel, Max Levchin, Luke Nosek, Russ Simmons, Yupan, and Ken Howry. So that's the foundation of PayPal. And their first aim is to raise 500,000. So in the book, it says they go to over 100 VCs and investors and get turned down by all of them, which should have been an indication that maybe their idea wasn't great because this was during the dotcom boom where money was being thrown around left, right, and center. So because they didn't raise investment, Thiel puts in 240 from his own, 240,000 from his own fund, and they raise the rest from friends and family. And one of the people who's involved in this early stage, he's not working with the company, but he comes in as a board member, is Reid Hoffman. And
another fascinating character.
And he's a friend of Thiel's from Stanford. They're chalk and cheese in terms of their political views, in terms of nearly all their views. People talk about how he's very empathetic, how he's very strategic and smart, but totally different from Thiel. But apparently in Stanford, they really got along because they appreciate each other's honesty and intellect. So they get along in that capacity.
Yeah, and coincidentally, I read an article by Hoffman this morning before we had this call.
Yeah,
in which he's calling out a recent event organized by David Sachs, who will also pop up in this book, which was a gathering and fundraising exercise for Donald Trump.
yes.
So what's interesting here is you see all of these on a personal level, these different political views, and yet everybody from a professional perspective gels and worked well together.
That's one of the things that comes out of the story, is that they are an awful lot, they're friends from college and they don't agree with each other, but they manage to have what they call these honest and lively and boisterous debates that never get personal. It's all very, on the intellect level. Now, as we'll see later, some of the dotcom people dispute this harmony. But anyway, so Hoffman is at this stage a board member of PayPal, and he starts questioning the idea that they have. And a bit of research makes them realize that this software idea for the Palm Pilot just isn't going to fly. There's no market for it. So Hoffman is kind of...
So is that's a security, or is that's a payment between... Oh, right, okay.
No, initially they started off with just a security to stop people from hacking into Palm Pilots. And they soon realized that nobody was really interested in hacking into Palm Pilots. So Hoffman started bouncing ideas with Levchin and Thiel and saying, we need to have something that can add value, that that people value. And this morphed into the idea of, well, why can't people beam money to each other using their Palm Pilots? And the only use case they could come up with this was that you've got four people maybe having lunch and they want to split the bill, and so they can beam money to each other. Now, even then, we're not talking about beaming it in the way that we might Revolut money. It was even more convoluted than that, because you had to beam it to an app, and then you had to take your Palm Pilot home, hook it up to your computer, and then the app would deduct it from your bank account.
That's right. Or you had to perfectly align the two Palm Pilots, I think, because they'd infrared ports on them.
Was that right?
That was another way. So if you perfectly aligned them and the two were perfectly level and pointed directly towards each other, you could theoretically beam money between.
Yeah. What I love about this idea, or the fact that they thought this was a good idea, was that it shows that how even some of the best minds in Silicon Valley back then thought that this was a good idea. But I think it also shows, which is probably true for nearly every company that starts, the original idea isn't the one that you continue with. It generally tends to morph into something else. But while they were discussing this as well, Hoffman then posited, well, what happens if somebody doesn't have their Palm Pilot? And Levchin went, well, that's easy. We just set up an email money transfer for them. And money transfer had been around forever, but with the onset of the internet and with email, you could now transfer money via email, but nobody had really done it. But it was a real simple idea. And Levchin just said he set it up in a matter of days, and it was such a simple idea that he didn't really think much of it. It was just a side thought, even though, as he admits in one of the interviews I listened to, that he and his friends started using this email money transfer feature straight after developing it. They still didn't think much of it because it was so easy to develop. So
maybe it was fundamentally unsexy as well, Maybe the idea of pointing a device at another device and sending the money is a little bit sexier or futuristic than an email.
It is. And for these tech nerds, it was like, that's so cool. That's so cool. Like this email money transfer feature, that was too easy to be cool. But anyway, with this Palm Pilot beaming money idea, they went again around looking for to raise more money. And they came across Nokia Ventures, which was the venture arm of Nokia Mobiles. And a guy called John Malloy was the director there. And he's one of the unsung heroes, I think Jimmy Sonny describes him, of the PayPal story. And Malloy wasn't really convinced by the Palm Pilot beaming money idea, But he was impressed with Thiel and Levchin, and then he did some due diligence, and some really prominent professors in mobile technology from the University of Illinois gave him a lot of really good feedback on Levchin and said, this guy is good. So on the back of that, really, Malloy and Nokia Ventures invested 4.5 million in PayPal. But it was more on the individual.
Wouldn't you wonder, though, at the same time, Nokia, given their strength and dominance in the handset market at that point, would they have entertained a conversation with the guys if didn't have the Palm Pilot / mobile device angle in the first place? So maybe it's a case of just luck or you know?
I think the idea that they had that it was involved in mobile technology was definitely yes. And I thought maybe Malloy was under his idea was, okay, maybe this mobile idea mightn't be great, but Levchin was a whiz in mobile technology, and he thought, we'll give them this money, and he come up with something to do with the mobile world that will be a benefit here. I think that was his original idea. So now they have some money. They start hiring people. Thiel hires mainly from Stanford. Levchin hires mainly from University of Illinois. Because they're hiring friends, they really build up this culture within PayPal where they can have these lively debates without falling out, because they're not hiring strangers. They know each other well, so they're able to argue. They're able to shout at each other about what's the right way to do. But apparently, they say it never really gets personal, and this helps build the culture of PayPal. But while they're doing all this anyway, we got to move to the next part of the story.
The parallel track, if you like.
The parallel track, and this is Elon Musk. So Musk, as most people know, born in South Africa, moved to Canada in 1989, got a science degree in Wharton University, was about to go into Stanford as an undergrad, but he was just looking at the internet boom happening, and Musk, with his huge belief in himself, looked at it and thought, you know what, I can do something here. And he goes on to form a company called Zip2, which with his brother and an investor. And the idea behind Zip2, it's this directory, a software, which they then sell to media companies, and the media companies then use this to sell local advertising.
Yeah.
And unlike an awful lot of other companies back in the internet era, this was actually a profitable company.
Yeah.
But Musk had this idea of building it into this huge directory, bigger than Yahoo is what he wanted to do. And he started developing it with this in mind. But he also started getting into trouble with his backers because of the feedback they were getting from the staff in Zip2. They were
talking managerial style and...
Yes. Coming in sleep deprived, changing the code without even asking the person who originally wrote the codes, chewing out staff in front of other staff. Now, Musk himself will admit that he was very inexperienced back then, but when you look at his track record, even up to the present day, he's usually doing...
I was about to say he didn't learn a lesson there, really, didn't he?
No, and the backers demoted him from his position as CEO. And because he was demoted, he didn't have much say over the strategy and direction of the company. And while he wanted to build it into this big Yahoo competitor, the board are looking at what they were doing and thought, we're doing very well here. We're going to focus on the core product that we're selling to media companies, which they did. They became a very profitable company, and they sold it to Compaq in 1999 for $307 million. And Musk got $21 million from us. So,
it's interesting to try and analyze what Compaq thought they were going to do with it. But anyway, so Musk is minted.
Musk is minted, but unfulfilled, Keith. He's not fulfilled. Because he had this, Musk always talks about, and this is one thing that really comes across in the story. And now, I am not a fan of Musk on a personal level. His dog whistling on social media, his infantile sexist jokes, the way he treats staff, I'm just not a fan of him. But on a business level, what comes out of this story is this big vision that Musk always has. He always wants something that'll have a great impact on humanity. Now, that sounds a bit lofty, but it is true. It's what this grand vision is his superpower. So he's rich and unfulfilled because he didn't get to have this huge impact that he always wants. And so he's looking for a new sector to get involved in. And he decides to go with the financial services sector because
he had some exposure to us, and he had a mentor in the space in Canada.
He had a mentor in Canada, yeah. He worked for a Canadian bank during some internship while he was in college in Canada. And this internship showed to him that banks were archaic, that there was very little innovation. that consumers were being charged left, right, and center, small fees, big fees, all over the place for things that they didn't really understand. So he thought there's a great opportunity here for disruption.
Yeah.
Financial. And his idea was, as he called it himself, he wanted to create the Amazon of financial services. He wanted you to do your banking, your mortgage, your insurance, your shares, everything under the one roof. That was his idea. And so he took 12.5 million of his fortune, which is a big chunk of his personal fortune, and put it into a new company that he called X.com. Now, the reason why he put in so much was twofold. First of all, and mainly, he wanted control.
Yeah.
He didn't want anybody to get in the way of his vision this time. And secondly, it really helped with recruitment, because back then, in the middle of the dot-com bubble, getting good staff is really hard. And people could see, okay, well, here's a young, successful entrepreneur who's putting an awful lot of his fortune in here. It helped him recruit good engineers. And he bought the URL X.com, which, I don't know, I mean, he seems to have this irrational love affair for that URL, because
It does, yeah.
The guys who sold him turned down $1 million cash offer from him, and the ultimate price isn't known, other than it was a mixture of cash and 1.5 million shares in X.com. It's what they got paid for. And I couldn't for the life of me keep find out eventually how much they cashed out.
Yeah,
but I'm guessing it would have been definitely in, I would say, somewhere in the 5 to 10 million. I know those shares would have been diluted, but I'm guessing it would be somewhere around there what they would have cashed out.
Nice.
So nice payday. So Musk forms X.com with a few founders. One of the most high-profile founders is a guy called Harris Fricker from Canada. He was a well-known young banker who left his $1 million a year salary job to join Musk, because he really was sold by Musk's big vision. But of course, pretty soon after he joined, they were just butting heads.
Yeah.
Because he came from a banking background. He knew all about banking regulations, and he wanted them to make sure it sticks by the regulations, join all the dots. Whereas Musk was just bulldozing towards this huge vision. Very much, I suppose, a precursor to Zuckerberg's move fast and break thing. And him and Fricker were just butting heads. I've got a quote here from one of the co-founders. He said, an open quote, "Elon is very good at pointing to the future and saying, the objective is over there, and I know it's over there, and we should all go over there," close quotes, which is fine now. He's, as they say, made his bones. But back then, he hadn't got this reputation. He was successful, but this grand vision thing that is his hallmark now, his MO, wasn't known back then. So it's very hard for these other young co-founders to rally in behind him and go, yeah, let's just steamroll over all the regulations and let's just build this fast and worry about the bugs later. So they just butted head, and Harris Fricker and the other two co-founders left.
There must have been a pretty marked contrast from his previous history, all right. It must have been very difficult to adjust from highly regulated to ignoring regulations. It must have been jarring.
I would say so. And Musk's personality, he just is very impatient. It's my way or the highway. Way with Musk. So that infighting slowed X.com down considerably. But after the other three co-founders left, Musk went out and he raised a bit of money from Sequoia Capital from Michael Moritz, raised $5 million. He didn't really need the money, but he thought it was important from a signal point of view. In other words, to tell the valley that Michael Moritz, who is this legendary venture capitalist, that he backs me. So that was important. And then together with Moritz, they hired Bill Harris as the CEO. He came from Intuit. Yeah. Musk wanted to focus more on the product. So, and then as well as this, while he's building up all these products and all these projects to make X.com this financial powerhouse, they developed the email money transfer idea as just an afterthought. As Musk said, he get pissed off when he started showing all the suite of products to banks and investors and everything. And an awful lot of them would say, oh, that email money transfer feature is really cool. And he'd be pissed off because as far as he was concerned, that was the least of all the products that they were developing. So this is where we have two companies that both kind of stumble across this email money transfer idea reluctantly, and still both sort of have it off to the side. It's not anything to do with their core products at all. And not only that, but they also share the same building for a brief time.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
And they actually knew each other before they became competitors. They knew each other, and they both thought, we know what you do, but we think your idea is crap.
And there was the sense that some people might connect outside at a smoke break or having
Yeah, yeah,
conversations and chat,
yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe end up in the same coffee place or something, which is kind of interesting. You wonder,
yeah.
was it entirely coincidental? Did the stars just align at that point in time in that particular geography, or?
Well, that's the thing about the PayPal story when you look back at it. There was a confluence of events that are just pretty amazing in terms of, how their paths crossed, how they both came across this idea around about the same time, how both of them really didn't think much of this idea either, even though both of them had this idea, which other people then thought was amazing.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange and fascinating story. But of course, the key difference between both companies at that time was that X.com had this huge vision and more focused on any one product. PayPal more focused on one product, and it was this Palm Pilot money beating idea. And because they were focused on it, people within PayPal were kind of going, I don't know, is this product really any
Yeah.
good? And Hoffman started raising questions about the viability of the product. But one of the key players in the story who now comes into it, who really started raising questions about the Palm Pilot idea, was a guy called, and we mentioned it, David Sachs.
Yeah, a real
And,
product guy, a dyed-in-the-wool product guy, focused.
and a focused product guy, very smart, very tough. Again, like Thiel, not a guy I can warm to on a personal level, but on a business level, everybody says this guy really got them in shape in terms of the product. And he was with McKinsey at the time. He was a friend of Thiel's from Stanford, and Thiel wanted to recruit him. But Sachs said, the only way I'm going to join PayPal is if you just focus on the email money feature idea, because the Palm Pilot idea is shit. And Thiel kind of fudged and said, yeah, we'll focus on the email money feature. But when Sachs joined, they put a bit more focus on the email one, but they were still focused on the Palm Pilot idea. And Sachs really rubbed up an awful lot of the PayPal people the wrong way because he was so dismissive of the Palm Pilot idea. But what changed everything for them, and what proved Sachs right really, was that eBay came into the picture. And eBay is the third player. You have PayPal, you have X.com, and the third major company in this whole story is eBay. And eBay itself is a fascinating story because when you look at it now, it's such a forgotten company, and it's a nothing now, really. Whereas back then it was the darling of the internet. It was the hottest company back then.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary telltale, right? But it was seen as sort of a huge marketplace for individuals. Started off by a guy who just wanted to sell, was it a laser pointer or something that was broken? And thought, God, maybe I could make a business out of this.
Yeah. And within 4 years, it was a $1 billion company.
Yeah, fascinating.
And so back then, PayPal, or rather eBay, getting mixed up with all the companies, back then eBay was making loads of money, but it didn't really get involved in the payment side. It let its buyers, and it was an auction site.
Yeah.
And it had this huge amount of sellers and buyers. And the only way that they could pay was by check or by money transfer. So this would delay the orders by days and sometimes even a week or two. And eBay wasn't really interested in getting involved in the payment side because setting up a payment company as PayPal and X.com were finding out was really, really difficult with all the regulations and everything. And so the eBay community were always on the lookout for something that would help them on this side of it. And they came across the PayPal money feature. And they were a really tight-knit community in eBay. And once a few of the early adopters started using it, they put it up on the community boards, and then other eBay sellers started using it, and it started spreading. But all of this was happening unbeknownst to X.com and PayPal. And the first they heard about it was in PayPal. An eBay seller rang them and asked them, could they change the PayPal logo or resize it for her so that she could put it on her eBay cart?
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, yeah, we can do that for you. But Sachs and another employee, they hopped onto the computer and went onto eBay and searched for PayPal. And all of a sudden they saw that there was thousands of eBay sellers using PayPal. And Sachs said it was a real holy shit moment. This product that I thought was brilliant, but that nobody else thinks brilliant, is taken off like wildfire on eBay. Oh, it was really funny, Keith. I don't know if it was in Jimmy Sonny's book or if it was one of the podcasts I listened to. Max Levchin was so put out by the fact that the email money feature was taken off on eBay that he even considered blocking the eBay URL from PayPal servers because he didn't want to distract from the core product, which was the path-sided money feature.
Yes, that was a narrow miss.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, they thought, geez, we've got a really viable product here. And so whether they liked it or not, and Musk didn't like it either, because he wanted X.com to be this huge financial powerhouse where most of their money was coming from these customers who were going to put all their banking and all their savings and do all their financial services on his X.com website. He didn't want to be making cents off little small transactions on it. But this is what was happening. And in
I
terms
guess
of
what's interesting from the benefit of hindsight, and just to go off for a moment,
yeah,
when you think about the vision for X.com in its purest form, it's not that dissimilar to some of the services we would see today, like Revolut. So maybe it was a case of the idea was right, but the timing was wrong.
and who knows if the timing was wrong? That's the one unknown question. If Musk had gotten his way, given his record of bringing like huge businesses, like a car business, a space exploration business, being able to get these huge businesses and actually make money from them and get them to be profitable, maybe he might have. Who knows?
Maybe.
But he didn't get a chance because the eBay community took this email money feature, and just to give an idea of how fast it grew. In November 1999, PayPal had 1,000 customers. By December, a month later, they had 10,000 customers. By February 2000, just 2 months later, they had 100,000 customers. So they were growing at a massive 10x rate over the course of a few months. And X.com were similar numbers.
And just
So
to make
all of
it, sorry, just one thing made clarify for listeners who aren't familiar with it. This essentially allowed a buyer and seller to exchange money between each other.
Yeah, via email.
It was that simple.
It was that simple. And that's what I'm saying. Like both Musk and Lechen were so dismissive of it because it was so easy to set up. Musk said that it took them 48 hours to get their email money service transfer set up. It was such an afterthought. So anybody really could have done it. The technology behind it wasn't that great. Now, as you will see, there was more to technology when you actually came to money transfer. There was the whole security side of it. That's an element that comes into the story.
Yeah, very much so.
But so all of a sudden, you had these companies that knew each other, that were doing their own thing, and that weren't in competition at all. All of a sudden, they were in competition. And this started this fierce battle between them, because to win customers, both companies set up this very expensive incentive program.
Yeah.
Whereby for PayPal, they paid $10 for each new PayPal customer and $10 for each referral that customer gave. And X.com gave $20 for each new customer and a $10 for each referral. And so this set up, and Jimmy Sonny in his book gives a really good blow-by-blow account of how the following weeks had a big impact on both teams as they burnt through money to try and beat each other and get as many customers as they could. And it's fascinating. But of course, wiser heads in both companies realized, we're going to we're going to run out of cash here. We can't keep doing this. We got to have a merger.
They were burning money, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good quote from Bill Harris, who's the CEO of X.com. Open quote. Would there have been a single winner? Yes, but it would have taken a lot longer and a huge amount of resources, and it's not clear which side would have won, close quotes. So the pragmatic thing to do was to cut the company. Thiel pushed it from the PayPal side, Harris pushed it from the X.com side, but Musk was dead set against it. And again, this goes back to his big vision thing. When you have this big vision like Musk has, he wasn't concerned about market trends, user growth, burn rate, the competitive landscape. None of that bogged him down in the same way that it did the PayPal guys, who were so focused on just one product. He had loads of products. This was only one side of it, and his vision was far bigger. So he was against it. So initially, when they did propose the merger, he put down a 90%, 10% split in X.com favor. Levskin and Thiel, of course, said no way. They went off and continued to build their customer base, and that improved their negotiation position. So eventually, when they agreed to a merger, it was 55%, 45% in X.com's favor. But before the deal was signed, the meeting, Musk let slip that he thought PayPal was, in his own words, getting a fucking deal. And Levchin went nuts because he realized that Musk would always see PayPal as being the junior partner. And Levchin really demonstrating his steeliness here. He said, right, deal's off. And he called off the deal. And Harris, the CEO, went round to his apartment and talked him into it and said, look, if I can get you a 50-50 deal, will you do it? And Levchin said, yeah, 50-50, equal partners, I'll do the deal. And so Harris went back to Musk, who, remember, didn't want to do the deal at all. And now all of a sudden he was looking at a 50-50 partner. And Harris said, if you don't do the deal, I'm
out of here. Yeah.
I'm out of here. And they were in the middle of a fundraising round. And Musk knew that if Harris left in the middle of a fundraising round, that would be detrimental to their fundraising. Yeah. So Musk felt really that Harris had put a gun to his head and he had to agree to it, but he really resented Harris as a result of that. But merger went ahead.
Harris's card was marked from that day on then, I guess.
Oh, yeah, the clock was ticking on Harris's reign as CEO, definitely from then on. So the merger happened in early 2000s, and on the back, and it was called X.com, the new company, and on the back of that, raised 100 million. Now, as Musk said, it was no problem raising 100 million back then. This was still the height of the internet bubble. It was actually at the very peak, because as Thiel rightly surmised at the time, we got to get this money in really quickly, because the bubble is about to burst. And not only raise the money, but pull the money in. And he was dead right. Other people thought that he should hold out for a higher valuation, but he was proven right, because as soon as they got their money in, the bubble burst. And there was 2.5 trillion written off the market. And it really had a long-term impact on tech stocks for many years after, because many VCs and investors got so burnt from the internet bubble. Of course, that played into PayPal alumni hand, because they were the only one with money who invested in the years after the bubble burst, which we'll talk about quickly. But they raised the money and that was it. They were merged. And in one way, it was great, because now there was only one big company in the email money transfer market, because an awful lot of their competitors were gone after the bubble burst. So you'd have X.com, only player in the market, but there was a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, including a fundamentally different tech stack. So one technology stack and platform is built on Microsoft, the other is based on open source lineup.
Yeah.
And the thought, being reasonably familiar with the technology world, of aligning those two platforms it's stuff of nightmares.
Well, I'm going to get into that now, because that happens in a few weeks' time. Because what happens first, there was a lot of internal conflict, first of all, because they had two different websites. They hadn't really decided on the strategy of the company. They hadn't decided on what to call the PayPal product. Musk wanted to call it X-PayPal to fit in with all the other X products, like X-Finance. The PayPal people kicked back about that. There was also duplication of roles. There was a huge clash of cultures. In Jimmy Sonny's book, he does paint a picture of it was all happy-clappy, lively debates, heated debates, but, didn't we all get along? And in fairness, in PayPal, Thiel did have very much an open book management style, and he allowed for full visibility of revenue plans, burn rates, and it did lead to these very open, heated, but honest debate.
Yeah.
But that didn't gel well with the X.com people. I have a quote here from Jeremy Stoppelman, who came from X.com, and he went on to found Yelp. And this is what he said. I think this was from the Fortune magazine article. He said, the clash of cultures turned into total dysfunction and warfare. Most ex-employees ended up leaving or getting fired. The culture was really an intellectual pissing contest, and some people didn't bite that. So you have this huge clash of cultures. You also have a problem on the leadership, because Harris remains a CEO. I think Musk is co-CEO, but is focused on product development. And you have Thiel is executive vice president of finance. You have Levchin as CTO, and as we see, Musk starts putting his nose in there, which caused problems, and we'll get into that. But Thiel isn't happy with Harris's leadership, nor are the other people. Thiel leaves the company, and Musk and Sachs and Levchin start to take action against Harris, because Harris has no real tech experience, and they also feel that he's filling the company with suits at the expense of product development. And so they organize what came to be known as the Nut House coup, in reference to a bar that they did this planning. After Thiel left, Musk, Sachs, Levchin got together and just thought, we got to get rid of Harris. He's not taking the company in the direction we want it to be taken in. The culture is being diluted, the ethos, everything wasn't working. And so they presented the board with a mass resignation threat. If Harris doesn't go, we're all resigning. So, of course, the board side with them. Harris goes, and now Musk becomes the CEO. And this leads to even more trouble. And we're talking about trouble, but we're also talking about the company is massively successful in terms of its growth rate here. They're getting over 10,000 signups a day. They've got over 2 million accounts now. About 1.7 million of those are connected to the email money transfer. And about 300,000 are connected to the X.com finance, the bank. They're handling about 40% of eBay transactions, but it's putting a huge strain on their servers, as you mentioned. About the Microsoft Linux issue. This is where it comes from. Their servers are crashing an awful lot because of the strain. And Musk's plan is to rewrite the whole PayPal code, and he insists on doing it on Microsoft. His reasoning is that Microsoft is faster, it's easier, there's better support. But Levchin and the PayPal people, and even some of the X.com people, sometimes for tech snobbery reasons, but I think there was also good technology reasons, believe that Linux, or is it Linux or Linux?
Yeah. Tomato, depends, whatever works for you, really.
They believe
I say Linux.
Right. Linux. I'm going to go with you because you know tech more than I do. Well, they say Linux is better. I mean, you read the book, and the tests that did, I think, prove that the Microsoft technology wasn't suitable for PayPal. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think there's other issues. Microsoft is comparatively more expensive. It's attractive, it's like a nice sort of warm bath insofar as there's open frameworks available to accelerate development, but it's quite restrictive. And it didn't really keep pace with the community-led development of Linux. So Linux would have become in the gap of time between X.com originally selecting Microsoft, and then at that crossroads on which direction to travel, Linux had accelerated and matured massively. So it wasn't the same decision to be made. And Musk's decision to focus on Microsoft didn't really take into account just how far Linux had moved forward in the intervening period. And it was essentially the underpinning technology of all of the web innovation. So it was the right decision for X at that time. It was the wrong decision for the merged entity, really. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And that's how it kind of worked out, because this really was a black mark against Musk, because the Microsoft rewrite wasn't working. They'd wasted a lot of time and resources on this. There was also pushback against the X.com name because market research has shown that the public just didn't like that URL. It had connotations of a porn website. And the people within PayPal or within the merged company at this time thought that Musk was letting his personal preference cloud his judgment, because he did have this irrational love affair with the X.com URL. And also you have to realize where the different founders were coming from. Musk, by this stage, had created a company, sold it successfully, made a lot of money from it, relatively a lot of money. Whereas the other founders, Levchin, Thiel, Hoffman, they'd never done that. So they were looking at it from a different perspective, and they just wanted to build this one product company and make a success of it. So they were coming at it from different angles. And also at this stage, they were in trouble financially. They had about 60 or 65 million left in the bank. They were burning through about 10 million a month. They were running out of roadway, and they were thinking, we got to be a bit more pragmatic here. This whole X.com vision of all these banking products is all well and good, but our money is being made on this one product. And that's where we got to focus. So strategically, there was a big, big divide between Musk and the rest of the team. Yeah. So when Musk went off on what he called a belated honeymoon, although he also admitted that he was using this honeymoon to raise some money. So how very romantic of him. But he goes off to Australia, and while he's off on his honeymoon, the rest of the team, including Sachs and Roelof Botha, who was a Musk hire, and he was their CFO, and an awful lot of Musk allies did come around thinking that we got to be more pragmatic here. And so they organized a coup against Musk while he was away on his honeymoon, and the board agreed with them, and Musk was sacked as CEO effectively.
You can imagine the optics of this. It's like two CEOs and what?
Yeah,
4 or 5 months or something?
Yeah. Yeah, Musk only lasted 4 months himself. Also, I thought it was very underhanded of them. I mean, I'm not a fan of Musk, but I thought it was very sneaky. Wait till he goes away on his honeymoon to sack him. But apparently, I think that's because he was such a strong character that it would be hard for them to convince the board if Musk had been there to argue
Yeah.
his side. Well, so strategically, it probably made sense, but it's very sneaky. But the email that Musk wrote after he got sacked was surprisingly gracious, where he wished the team the very best, where he praised Thiel and asked the team to back Thiel. It's not what I would have expected.
Yeah. I probably took a less generous view of that. I thought it was a pragmatic decision to protect his sunken investments.
But
Though,
it was.
okay, he was able to abstract his emotional reaction to his financial interest. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't completely altruistic. He was thinking about how best to protect his investments.
I know, I suppose I'd be coming at it more from an emotional point of view, in that I could think if it happened to me, I wouldn't have written an email like that. But like that, I'd have been smitten. But anyway, so Thiel then becomes CEO. Now, it must be said, this wasn't a power play by Thiel, because everything I read and researched showed that Thiel was the most reluctant CEO in the history of Silicon Valley. I really don't think Thiel is CEO material, and I don't think he enjoyed the CEO role. But anyway, so Musk gone, Thiel in charge. They start to strategize. Their first thing they need to do is say, okay, enough of this X.com big banking vision. We're just focusing on one product, the PayPal product. We're renaming the company PayPal. That's our focus. And the second main thing they had to tackle was fraud, because fraud was a huge part of this story. And they were losing millions to fraud, to such a degree that if they didn't tackle the fraud question, they were going to be out of business within a few months. So it was, as they say, an existential crisis. It was all hands on deck. And Jimmy Sonny's book, again, paints a great picture of how these Russian hackers used to taunt Levchin and the PayPal team. They'd send them emails every time Levchin made some update, going, oh, nice update, but this is how we got around it. And look, there
was one particular name, wasn't there? Was it Igor?
Igor, yeah.
Yeah, and he was a really target Levchin.
Yeah, and Levchin was relentless. This is one of his superpowers. He'd go into the chat forums, because Levchin came from Ukraine and he could speak Russian. And he'd go into the Russian chat rooms and forums. He'd be following these hackers, seeing what they were doing. And eventually they came up with patented software that is still in use today that saved the company big time. One of them was the money deposit.
So they make a tiny test transaction of a random number of cents in your...
Exactly. They do two of them. So say they put 12 cents in your account, and then they put 22 cents in your account. And then the 12, 22 were the 4 digits that you would use to prove your account. They developed that. Very smart. They didn't come up with CAPTCHA, but they were the first company to successfully scale CAPTCHA. And all these things not only reduced fraud massively, but also transformed the company into more than just a money transfer company. Now they were a risk management, anti-fraud company as well. And so they really grew, they really thrived. And in September 2001, Thiel announced that they were going to float. They were going to go for an IPO, and which is a pretty risky and ballsy move back then, because you had the dotcom burst the year beforehand. You then had 9/11 had just happened. The markets were tanking. The press at the time were scathing of PayPal. They painted them as a company that had to pay to get customers, that had lost over $200 million, and that wasn't showing a profit. But they went ahead anyway with the flotation. Having said that,
couple of false dawns or false starts along the way as well, wasn't there?
Well, there was eBay. eBay were threatening to muddy the waters here, because Meg Whitman, who was in charge at that time, let it known that she might let it be known to the markets that eBay would kick PayPal off their platform. And of course, they were getting the majority of their revenue from eBay. Now, this raised a few questions. You kind of think, why didn't eBay kick them off the platform way before this stage? There's two main reasons. First of all, eBay did get into the money payment system when they bought a company called BillPoint.
Yeah.
BillPoint just didn't work. PayPal were streets ahead of them. The PayPal team just worked night and day to make sure that their product was always better. And the eBay community voted with their feet. They used PayPal, they didn't use BillPoint. And another reason why eBay didn't kick them off is because of this community. For some reason, the community in eBay had this real sense of entitlement and ownership over the site. And if eBay made any changes without their input, they would kick up and go nuts. And so eBay were very beholden to their community, and they knew if they kicked PayPal off, that there would just be uproar. So that's what. Now, that's not to say that eBay didn't try and do everything in their power to disrupt PayPal. They brought in a buy it now button that didn't allow PayPal to be involved in certain auctions, but that particular feature was a disaster. It was so faulty, they had to withdraw that. They'd send legal letters and threats, and that was an interesting part. That's where Reid Hoffman really came into his own.
Yeah, he's fascinating. He's behind the scenes sort of eBay Sherpa. Really, he's softballing, but not always soft either. But
not always
back channel, politically nuanced approach to settling down that relationship.
Yeah, Thiel called him their chief firefighter, and that's exactly as you said. He was their diplomat, because every now and then, when the legal threats might come in from eBay, he'd come back with his own legal threat, saying that there could be an antitrust issue. He admits himself readily that there was no real water to that.
But even the way he couches, he said, "I'm worried this might be perceived as," and you're like, "Oh, this is class."
Yeah, but it also shows their aggression towards the very platform where they're making all their money, that they are prepared to sort of let it be known we could do this. And they actually had somebody within PayPal who was working full time on creating this antitrust case, just in case they needed it. But anyway, and as you said, there was also a few other flies in the ointment to the IPO. I wasn't aware of this issue with parasitic companies that would come to the fore whenever a company.
Yeah, whenever it's an IPO, so somebody goes, "I've got a patent."
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's all they are, a sleeping vehicle to challenge and try and get a settlement.
Yeah, and what would happen is, for listeners, something I wasn't aware of, if you're going to float your company, right, if you announce this and it takes you maybe about 6 months to float, what some companies do is about a week or two before you float, they'll serve you with some legal papers saying you're infringing my paid rule, or you're infringing this contract that we have. There'll be no basis really to it. They're just parasites, really. But what they're hoping is that you'll settle before you go to IPO, because if you don't settle, then you have to rewrite your IPO papers, which causes a delay, and you also have to put this lawsuit in your IPO papers, which doesn't look good.
That's a risk.
Yeah, it's a really horrible thing to do. And if you're making your money that way, good luck to you, but it's just wrong. But anyway, and PayPal had 3 of these to contend with. Despite all these issues that were going on, they went ahead. And actually, the eBay mudding the waters issue, Hoffman came up with a strategy to head that off at the pass. He re-entered negotiations with eBay, because eBay had made offers to PayPal in the past. But he said, why don't we enter negotiations with eBay before we go to IPO? Because if we do that, eBay then can talk negatively about us, because they will something to do with their fiduciary duties. It'll be illegal for them to talk about.
That was a master stroke. So he kind of boxed them in then and kept them quiet.
Yes, kept them quiet while they went to IPO. Now, they did come back with an offer. Probably 150 million.
Reid Hoffman said he'd be able to take the company off the table for $1 billion. He was authorized to negotiate.
But it was strategic. He did it so that it would stop eBay from talking. When they made the 850 million offer, PayPal were tempted, because it was a big price, and it was close to what they floated for. But anyway, they went with the flotation. They floated in February 2002, opened at $13, closed the day at $20. Levchin says it was the happiest day of his life. It was a huge success. It valued the company at $1 billion. And they threw a cake party to celebrate the IPO. And go on.
The thoughts of Thiel doing the
I know. And half drunk, he took on 10 employees in a speed chess game, and he beat 9 of them except for David Sachs. And there's a great picture of David Sachs celebrating having beaten Peter Thiel in that chess game.
He was furious. He can't enjoy the 9 victories. He's furious about the 1 loss. He must be great crack altogether,
Oh, you know what? Out of all of them, and Levchin comes across as really nice, but out of all of them, I think Hoffman definitely seems like the guy that you'd be able to have a beer with and have a good crack with. The rest of them, look, they're grand. But anyway, so the IPO happens, but they're still then, after the IPO, fighting eBay. They're all wrecked, they're all tired, and they're very open to selling when eBay come back to them 4 months later. It's easy to put a price on it now because they floated. Their market valuation is there for everyone to know. And so eBay buy them in July 2002 for 1.4 billion. As a result of this, Musk has 11.7%. He gets $176 million. Thiel has 3.7%. He gets $55 million. Levchin gets $34 million. And an awful lot of the senior management.
Yeah.
They all make out pretty well. But what's interesting is then that what comes out of it, but we won't have the time to get into it. But just when you look at what some of the alumni did, Chad Hurley and 2 other PayPal alumni set up YouTube. Reid Hoffman sets up LinkedIn. The Stoppelman sets up Yelp. Sachs gets involved with a company called Yammer, which I never heard of. And he sold
they were like social media. So they, and messaging, they sold to Microsoft, I think.
Did they? Yeah. And Levchin set up a firm. And then, of course, you have Musk with his outside vision, workaholism, his need to create an impact. He uses his money to create Tesla and SpaceX. And he buys back X.com in 2017 from PayPal for an undisclosed sum. And based on what he said when he bought Twitter, I think he still has this idea running around in his head to create some sort of financial powerhouse.
He does, and he also wants to create the everything app. So a bit like the Asian WeChat type app.
Yeah.
Where you have one app to do it all, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's watch that space, I think.
But before we just surmise, it wasn't just those companies, Keith. Because of the dot-com bubble and the sort of reluctance to invest in tech stock, PayPal and Sequoia were the only people really who were willing to invest. And they invested in 646 companies over the course of 15 years. And some of them are Airbnb, Palantir, Stripe, Uber, Square, Pinterest. But the most notable is probably Thiel. Peter Thiel was the first investor in Facebook. He put in $500,000 for a 10% stake, which he sold mostly in 2014 for $1 billion. So a nice markup. What if he had held on to them today? That $1 billion would now be worth $127 billion.
Oh my! And not only was he an investor, he was an advisor and mentor to Zuckerberg. And
was he?
Yeah, and Zuckerberg and Reid Hoffman. Whether Hoffman invested or not, I can't say, but he would have certainly, facilitated by Thiel, had conversations and given Mark Zuckerberg advice around the concept of the network effect.
Yeah.
So quite an interesting one, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I know there were so many facts and other interesting side stories to this that we weren't able to get into. I would definitely recommend people getting the Jimmy Sani book. It's a very, very good read. But yeah, how do you think of the story overall?
I really enjoyed the story. As I was saying to you, it's very close to my heart. It's not bedtime reading. It's almost too exciting and too interesting to turn your brain off. It turns your brain on. So I would sit up at night reading the book and really getting into it. And some of the names are so familiar to you. I guess it's interesting to understand them as much as you can on a personal level. I think Thiel still remains enigmatic. You don't have the same sense of who he is or what he really stands for in the way that you would say with Hoffman. I think, as you said, Hoffman seems like a decent sort of person. You don't have any real sense of who Thiel is. And that makes him all the more intriguing. You know, I think there's an episode to be done on Thiel, I think, at some point.
That's what I loved about this. There's probably 5 episodes that you could do as an offshoot between eBay, which is, I think, a great story in itself. Thiel, as you say, then of course Musk is probably, you can do a few different episodes on Musk. But I loved it because, getting back to what you said there, and for our listeners who mightn't be aware, myself and Keith were involved in the dot-com era on a much smaller scale in Ireland, but we did get funding from a company. It all blew up in our faces. But I have nothing but fond memories for that era. It was a real exciting time to be starting a company. There was
we had that giant breadth of vision as well. I do think, I would say, and you know, I'm going to claim I said it at the time, but the US in general and California in particular was where it was happening. And I think we were, to a certain extent, maybe boxed in by our local geography to a certain extent. We couldn't do a lot about it. I mean, that's where our investors were. But I think in looking back at it through the lens of time, I suppose it would be interesting to wonder how things might have been different if we had have upstick moved to California.
Definitely.
But we didn't. For that sense.
And it was ground zero. Palo Alto, where they were starting their company, that would have been the place at the time to start.
Yeah, and I've been there a couple of times. Quite unglamorous, actually, I would say. I don't know what I expected. I expected this rich technology sort of haven.
Yeah.
And no, it's just a regular place where the ley lines meet and for technology. But it's not a glamorous place.
No, the story itself, anyway, like what I loved about it was that you had these two companies with a lot of great minds, and yet they kind of stumbled across this product and then even reluctantly took it on. But then once they decided on the product, they really focused on it and they fought tooth and nail, almost as if their lives depended on it. And I really liked that aspect of the story. So
yeah, it was hard work, it was luck, it was pragmatism.
Yeah.
It was a lot of those sort of factors, and the raw talent and the right recruitment process and the right group of people that came together at once. It's a fantastic story.
Great story. Well, listen, good to talk, Keith, and I look forward to your suggestion for next month.
Yeah, let me scratch my head in that one.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.